You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
So in 1984, a movie came out called This Is Spinal Tap. It was a mockumentary kind of poking fun at musicians and a satirical look at the music industry. And in it, one of the things they do is they make fun of, the way they talk about things and just absurd comments like, his amp goes up to 11, so it's one louder than anything else. Or he pulls out the Black album and says, you look at this and you think, how much more black could it be? And the answer is none more black. But a few decades later, scientists found they actually could make things a little bit more black than our traditional black. Scientists developed what we call VANTA Black, which is this black substance that's made up of what they call nanotubules. They're like these microscopic, we cannot see them, they're so tiny, tubes. So that instead of reflecting the light, instead of light hitting it and bouncing off, the light gets absorbed. It gets trapped in those tiny, tiny little tubules. And so the end result is VANTA Black absorbs 99.96% of all the visible light that hits it. Now, one of the things I find really interesting about this is, with that substance that is the blackest of blacks that we can create, there is this Spinal Tap level of absurd feud happening in the art world because the artist Anish Kapoor has the exclusive right to use VANTA Black for artistic purposes. And another artist, Stuart Semple, is publicly calling out Kapoor for his bad behavior in ways that are really kind of petty, but if I'm being honest, thoroughly amusing as well.
I feel like who art ed?
Try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood art ed me?
Yeah. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, where we explore visual arts in an audio medium. I'm your host, Kyle Wood. And for this week's Fun Fact Friday, we're going to be looking at VANTA Black and the feud between two artists, Anish Kapoor and Stuart Semple. In 2014, British research scientists came up with the Blackest Black VANTA Black. VANTA standing for vertically aligned carbon nanotube arrays. So the sort of microscopic tubes essentially trap the light so that 99.96% of light is absorbed in the VANTA Black substance. And Anish Kapoor, the artist who created the famous bean sculpture in Chicago's Millennium Park, although he hates it when people refer to it as the bean, it's technically called Cloudgate. But anyways, the dude who created the bean bought the exclusive rights to use VANTA Black for artistic purposes. So he's the only person who has the license to use VANTA Black. And when he did that, he really irritated tons of people. And honestly, there were a lot of people who were not overly fond of him to begin with. But when he basically developed this monopoly on VANTA Black, people just felt like an artist should be able to come up with such unique ideas that their work stands on its own, and they don't have to rely on hoarding the tools and keeping things all to themselves to have this gimmick that no one else can use. So enter Stuart Semple. And Semple's an artist who's worked in all sorts of different things. He's done performance, he's done painting, sculptures, installations, all sorts of different things, because what he's really about is the experience of art. And one thing that really just did not sit well with him was that experience of one person sort of locking everyone else out and blocking access to everyone else. Semple has these ideas about art being a little bit more democratic than that and allowing everyone to have access. So Semple has been working for 2 decades making his own art, but also making his own art materials. And he sells them at a price that the average artist can afford. So it's a very reasonable price to make it more equitable and give everyone access to these high quality materials. And Semple developed his own pink. It's the world's pinkest pink. This was in part response to the world's blackest black, VANTA Black. And so what Semple did was he said, anyone in the world except Anish Kapoor can have the world's pinkest pink. So he started marketing his world's pinkest pink, and when you purchase it, you have to agree that you are not Anish Kapoor and you will not supply this to Anish Kapoor. You are not affiliated with Anish Kapoor. Basically, the one guy's got a monopoly on the world's blackest black, and another guy is creating pigments for anyone except the guy who keeps the monopoly on the world's blackest black. So Anish Kapoor, unsurprisingly, was not particularly thrilled with this development. And I guess at some point he got his hands on this quite literally via Instagram. He sent out a picture of the Semple pink pigment covering his hands. And Semple, in response, created the world's most glittery glitter. The thing about that is that diamond dust has shards that really, if Kapoor decides to cover his hands in that again, he's going to get a lot of like micro abrasions, lots of little cuts on his hand. And Semple has created a whole line of other things. He's also got his own extreme black paint. He's got Black 2.0 and Black 3.0. It is the world's blackest acrylic paint. It is super, super black and matte, and it absorbs most light. It is, I would say, to the average person looking at it, it's going to look like VANTA Black. It is not absorbing like 99.96% of the light, but it is pretty close. The human eye is only so sensitive. It is so dark and it is so matte. We can't see contours of forms through it as well. And so that has this interesting effect. But just like all of his other stuff, Semple markets it saying it is for anyone except Anish Kapoor. So Anish Kapoor can have his, VANTA Black material with all of its toxic elements in the process, and the rest of the world can have Black 3.0 and Semple's other creations. This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted. If you found this tolerable, please like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week in the show notes, on Twitter @WoodArtEd, and on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.